Danny Flexen here for Seconds Out with Eubank Jr. at your gym in Brighton and Hove. Bit cold on the seafront, but lovely nonetheless, picturesque, some might say. Wanted to start off just talking about, I'm sure you've been asked these questions before, but how you first got into boxing. So tell us maybe a little bit about your upbringing, your childhood first, and how that kind of led into boxing.
My childhood was anything but the normal story for a typical fighter. I went to private school. I had everything I needed growing up. Lived in a big house. My father obviously made a lot of money during his career, and I was always comfortable. That typically is not the background of a fighter. And he thought that I wouldn't be tough enough. He thought that I was going to be one of those guys who would try the sport, end up getting hurt, and jump out of the ring and never come back. So he thought, I'll save him the effort. Pushed me into, my schoolwork. He said, be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a football player. Pretty much just whatever you want except boxing. But there was just something inside me. It was a drive. I'm very competitive. In school, I was involved in every sport that you could think of: swimming, athletics, football, cricket, rugby. And once I found out about boxing, I was like, wow, this seems like it's the ultimate form of competition.
How did you find out about boxing? Was that through your dad and his accomplishments, or at school, or how did you find out that boxing was a thing?
My father always kept me away from it. I wasn't allowed to watch his fights. I never went to his fights. So I went to a sleepover about 11, 12 years old. Went to go and find a VHS tape to watch, looking through the cabinet, and I see my dad on the front cover of one of them. So I was like, what's this? I'm 11 years old, and popped it in, and there he was fighting. And that's how I first was introduced to the sport, and really introduced to what he did for a living. As a kid, I'd always, be around him, see people taking pictures and photographs and signing autographs, and I didn't really get it. I just thought it was just normal for me because I saw it every day. But then once I saw that, I realized, okay, this is what he does. This is why he's so popular. This is why everyone's so drawn to him, because he's this fighter, he's this athlete. And from then I wanted to try it for myself. But for years he blocked me. For years he said no. And then about 14 years old, he finally gave up. I remember Lennox Lewis coming over to the house. We were all sitting down, and he said, my dad told him, I don't want him fighting. I don't want him to get hurt. And Lennox said, that's like a parent telling their child they can't drive because they don't want them to crash. It just doesn't work like that. You gotta let them find out for themselves. You gotta let them walk their own path. And soon after that, I was in the gym, and I fell in love with the sport. 14 years old, boxing, fighting, training with these guys. All the other sports I was playing just seemed boring, bland. I fell out of. I was playing rugby and running athletics every week, every day even. And after the boxing, I was like, well, I can't go back to that now. Now I'm hooked. This is the ultimate form of competition. So yeah, that's how it all started.
From what I've read, between the ages of maybe 14, when you first discovered boxing, up to around 16, 17, you started to get into a little bit of trouble outside the ring as well, that there was a certain amount of aggression maybe in your character at the time for whatever reason, and that led to you spending some time over in America not long after that. Just tell us a little bit about that, how that came about.
At that age, 16, 17 years old, you're boisterous, you want to prove yourself, especially with second name Eubank. Everyone's expecting you to be this tough guy, and kids are trying you and they're trying it on, and I get into fights. I was involved with one of the local gangs, and you know, they would use me. They knew I could. They knew I could have the scraps. They would use me to settle beefs. And as you know, I was young and dumb, and I wanted to be the man. So I would fight. I was street fighting on a regular basis. And there's actually one to this day, I think on YouTube, there's a video of me at 16 years old.
I remember watching it on MySpace about 10 years ago.
Yeah, fighting some kid in a car park. That was like a normal thing for me. And it's funny because I'd be with all these street kids doing all this street stuff, and then I'd go home to a £2 million mansion. It didn't, you know, I was living a different life.
What did your parents think of it all?
They didn't know. They didn't know any of the stuff I was doing until that particular fight did actually make it into a newspaper, and then I got in some pretty serious trouble after that. And then soon after that, that combined with the fact that my father saw how serious I was with the sport, they decided to send me to Las Vegas, the mecca of boxing. It used to be New York, now it's Las Vegas, obviously with all the casinos and the big venues, the big fight venues out there. You know, any given time you've got, you know, a whole group of top fighters training and fighting in the city of Las Vegas. So it's a great place to train and to learn. So I was sent out there. I went to school out there. Went to high school, got my high school diploma, and fought. You know, learned how the game really is. Started my amateur career. Won the Golden Gloves. Went to the Nationals, all before my 10th fight, my 10th amateur fight, you know, which was unheard of at the time. But yeah, that's where I was introduced to the hardship of boxing, because I was out there alone. I was going to the gyms by myself. I was getting beaten up every week by pros. I'm a young kid, 17, 18 years old, top ranked gym, getting battered by these pros who see a young kid from England, second name Eubank. You know, let's see what he's got. You know, who does he think he is? He shouldn't be in the gym. Let's chase him out of there.
Do you remember the identity of any of those pros now?
No, I mean, not anymore. I sparred countless. I was sparring Zab Judah. I was sparring Chad Dawson. I sparred loads of different guys. Obviously, I was training with Mike McCallum, under Mike McCallum, then under Floyd Mayweather Sr. But I would go in there and fight anybody. I only had 26 amateur fights, but the amount of spars and the amount of experience I got from, you know, those gym sessions, that was my amateur career really. That was where I learned how to fight. Because a lot of people, you know, they say, you know, 26 fights is, you know, it's nothing. And it's not. Some of these guys, they're going into the professional ranks with 100, 200, 300 fights under their belt. But for me, I learned how to fight in those gyms. So, and it worked out. It was sink or swim there. You know, it was like if you can survive in Las Vegas, then I'll believe that you want to do it. And I survived.
So before we move on from this subject, I want to give you an opportunity to correct what may be a misconception. So at the time when you went out to the US, I believe your brother Seb went out as well.
Yeah.
It was reported at the time that it was an adoption, an American lady had taken you in, although it seems, reading other reports, that maybe that was just so you could achieve dual citizenship more than anything else.
It was a guardianship. She was my legal guardian out there. Obviously, as at that age, you have to have some type of adult there. I wasn't adopted. My father or mother are not going to just
well, that's what I mean. That's
give
why
me
I
a way
want you to correct a misconception, because a lot of people saying, oh, he became too boisterous and they had to kind of shift him out to America for a couple of years because he was becoming a lot of trouble and that kind of thing, you know, the stuff on the streets and all that sort of stuff. But as you're saying it now, they were kind of sheltered from that sort of stuff that was going on anyway, so it doesn't really add up, if you like.
No, yeah. I mean, listen, at that age, everybody's getting into fights. Everyone's doing stuff they shouldn't do. You have to grow. You have to learn. But yeah, out there in the States, it was a great experience. You know, being able to get away from the pressures of having the last name Eubank as well, because obviously as an amateur, having that name in Britain, there was a lot of pressure. You know, every show you're going to, this massive crowds, and everyone's expecting all these amazing things from a 16, 15-year-old kid. They're comparing him to a world champion. So it wasn't really fair. In Las Vegas, I kind of was able to fly under the radar and just learn and get on with it.
Did that ever make you think twice about turning professional? Because obviously your father's most celebrated in the professional game rather than the amateurs. And when you became based in the UK again to launch your professional career, although the name would open doors, there would also be that added pressure of his shadow, if you like, lingering over your career.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm always going to be compared to my father. There's always going to be, I can't get away from that. And I don't really want to. It's not, you know, it doesn't affect me. If anything, it pushes me, because I know I have so much to live up to. I know I have this big name. My father's done so much in the sport, so I can't let the name down. I have to perform. I have to fight. I have to represent the family name. So I used it to my advantage. A lot of fighters will buckle under that type of pressure, being compared to a world champion in the amateurs and as a novice professional. It's tough, you know, it's not fair, but that's life. We're in the same sport, we've got the same name, you can't get away from it, you just got to deal with it, you just got to learn how to use it to your benefit instead of letting it mess with your mind and affect your performances.
You mentioned that you only had 26 amateur fights. We see a lot of talk in the boxing media now about Anthony Yard as an example, who had an equally brief amateur career and probably didn't have the benefit of the type of sparring you enjoyed in Las Vegas. But it's often been used as an explanation by his promoters and his team as to why he's been moved quite slowly as a pro, because he's still learning on the job. You, on the other hand, have moved relatively quickly as a pro, even given your lack of amateur experience. Do you ever look back and think, I should have moved a little bit slower, or I could have got away with moving a little bit slower because of the dearth of amateur experience?
I think my career has worked out just fine. I think that everything happens for a reason. The fighters I faced, the fights I've had, I had 9 fights in my first year. You know, I'm happy with how everything turned out. And you know, it's got me to where I am today. So I can't say that I hope I was moved slower. I think it was a good start, and obviously I'm here now and about to fight in the biggest fight of my career against James DeGale. So everything's worked out nice.
Are you at your peak right now, both physically and as a boxer?
I'd say so. 29 years old. These are my prime years for sure. I've got a good 2-3 years of prime fitness, of prime performance left in me, and then after that doesn't mean I'm going to give up after that. That just means that after that you have to be more smart with who you're fighting, how you're fighting, the way you're training, because after 32, 33 years old, you do start to see a dip in your physical attributes. It's just natural. But if you live the life, if you're dedicated, if you're responsible with it, if you don't drink and blow up in weight in between fights, you can fight until you're 38, 39 and still be very effective, as we've seen from fighters like Floyd Mayweather. You know, yeah, he lives the flashy lifestyle and he's showing all this money and the jets and the cars and the girls, but you know, this is a man who is dedicated. He doesn't drink. He doesn't do drugs. And
that's why he's got all the jets and the cars and everything
exactly,
else,
yeah. People don't realize, they don't see that side of him. They don't see the dedication. Partly because he doesn't show it. You know, he wants you to see a certain side of him, which makes you think, you know, how can he live that life and be such a great boxer? But trust me, he puts in the time. Of course he does. He's responsible with how he trains and how he lives his life. If you can do that, then you have a long career ahead of you.
And before we talk about the only 2 defeats you've suffered in your professional career, obviously we have to cover that, but what's the performance or victory of which you're most proud so far?
I'd say winning the IBO world title. becoming a world champion.
That was against Ronald Quinlan, right?
Yeah, that was my biggest achievement to date, I think. But like I said, I've got so many more accolades and so much more goals to reach. And this fight here with James DeGale is the start of that. This puts me back where I need to be, and able to challenge for these world titles and fight the best. Beating a James DeGale puts me in that position, so I have to win.
Talking of DeGale, let's put something to you that he said quite a lot in the build-up, and I think it would be good to get some clarity from you on this. You've only had 2 defeats in your professional career. One was a very tight decision to Billy Joe Saunders. I was ringside for that one. I thought it was very close. The second one I thought was a wider victory for George Groves, which was more recently. Do you, as James DeGale alleges, do you still believe that you should have won both of those fights?
I'm not here to talk about James's opinions. I'm not here to talk about George Groves or Billy Joe Saunders. All I'm here to do is talk about the fight. Talk about James, talk about what I have to do to win. I don't focus on the past. I'm not worried about the fight I had 6 years ago, 5 years ago. If the rematch comes about, great. If it doesn't, it's a shame for the fans. Obviously, Saunders has had these drug issues, and he got a ban and all the rest of it. That might make it easier to get the rematch now that he doesn't have a world title. But my focus is not on either of those fighters. It's on James DeGale.
What about, though, DeGale's... He's basically using his opinion that you believe you won those fights to show a wider delusion on your part. How do you respond to that criticism?
Listen, people have called me delusional my entire career. From the day I had my first fight. He's just fighting because he's got a name and he's going to make a quick buck, and he'll be out of the game in 6 months or a year. Again, I'm not worried about James's opinions. Everyone has their own opinions. That's great. All I've got to do is focus on what I need to do to win.
What would you say you've learned from the Groves fight, regardless of whether you thought you won or lost or whatever else? What have you taken from that that's going to help you in this fight and going forward?
Preparation is key. I didn't have a trainer for that fight. I didn't have a game plan, a strategy. I made mistakes in the fight. I didn't, my chief sparring partner was a 6'7" cruiserweight who fought nothing like George. It was the wrong preparation. Now I have a full-time trainer. I have a full-time sparring that is, represents what James DeGale is, and that's going to enable me to perform better. We have a game plan. We have strategy. Everything is tailored and focused, and that's what has to be at this level in the game. At the elite level, you can't afford to be giving your opponents any type of advantage. And that's what I've been doing my entire career by not having a trainer. So yeah, we're not doing that anymore.
Given the historic beef, if you like, everyone likes to use that word these days, between yourself and James DeGale, also the fact that you have had setbacks in your career up until this point, would this be, assuming you win, would this be the most rewarding victory personally for your career?
I believe so. I believe this is the biggest fight of my career. It's do or die. I can't afford a flat performance, let alone a loss. But James is in the same position, so that's what makes this fight so exciting, because it's two fighters that are literally fighting for their careers. We can't afford to give we can't afford to give each other an inch, and we both know that. So this is the biggest fight of my career, and I believe it will be the most rewarding victory.
And he seems to really dislike you. I mean, being in his company several times, it doesn't seem contrived in any way. He seems to genuinely have a dislike for you. Is it the same on your side, or is it more business?
James is, he's not a likable guy. I'm not going to sit here and say I like him. We've had our issues. We don't get along. Do I hate the guy? No, I don't hate anybody. At the end of the day, we're both just trying to make a living. It is business, it's a sport. If you let emotion and anger and hate get into your mind, you're going to make mistakes on the night, which I expect him to do. for me, as much as I don't like the guy, I try and keep a neutral mindset. I try and keep my emotions out of boxing. I try and be professional. You got kids looking up to you. You got the older generation looking down. You can't act certain way. You can't say certain things. You can't act certain ways, which is what he does. I let him do what he does. I let him say the things he says. At the end of the day, what matters is who gets their hands raised February 23rd, and that's going to be me.
And with that in mind, and obviously not wanting to take you down too much of a disrespectful route, did you indeed school him in sparring?
Listen, I'm not an actor. I'm not a liar. I'm not a fake. I beat the guy up in sparring. I've said it a million times. I'm bored of saying it. Everybody knows. More importantly, he knows. That's all that matters.
Did you also, I have to ask this because it's just come into my mind because he said this when we interviewed him, did you send him a long Facebook message after he lost to George Groves, basically commiserating and predicting that this fight would happen one day?
Yes, I did. I wasn't commiserating with him. I was saying, listen, we're going to fight at some point. I want to fight you at some point. So don't lose that energy that you have. You know, leading up to the George Groves fight, he had a lot to say for himself. He built the fight well. I didn't want him losing and then becoming humble and not really, losing his confidence and all that. You know, because I want to fight. I want to fight a live wire. I don't want to fight somebody who doesn't have anything to say for himself, who's afraid to speak up. So I said to him, listen, we're going to fight at some point. I want to fight you at some point. Keep doing what you're doing. I don't know how he received that message, but I sent it, and now we're here.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time today, and we wish you the very best of luck on the 23rd of February.
I appreciate it.
Cheers.